Welcome to the Long Take Review, where four college professors talk film, providing insight, not assigning homework. I'm your host, Jen Subchakchai Bankard, and I'm here with three sinners. First, he's wondering if we can invite him in. It's PT McNiff. How's it going, PT?
Now we out here playing games, telling ghost stories in place of doing what we ought to do, being kind to one another. I'm doing well, Jen. How are you?
I'm doing great. PT McNiff, ladies and gentlemen, noted Southerner.
I'll tell you what.
Okay. Calm down. You'll have plenty of time. And if he keeps dancing with the devil, one day he's going to follow him home. It's Antonio Elefano. How's it going, Antonio?
This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. I'm doing great. I'm very excited, obviously, to be here, Jen.
Wow, way to bring up the energy. Yeah, well, this is what we need to talk about this movie. Amazing. All right, and last but not least, he's been gone a long while, but he back now. It's Hasib Hossein. Welcome back, Hasib. How you doing?
I don't believe in magics, ghosts, demons, just power. And I don't know how we're going to follow up Antonio right there. Holy crap.
I know. Sorry.
We always have Antonio go last. Normally.
It's true. He brings the house down.
Yeah.
So those, dear listeners, were all references to the film we are here to review today. And by what I can surmise already, very excited to be here to review today, Ryan Coogler's Sinners, which is out in theaters now. So this film has made quite a splash. It's not usually the time of year, I feel like, where movies are making splashes, but it's a big hit. You know that a movie's doing something right when not only are people talking about its box office, but they're like arguing about its box office, which I don't know if anyone's been following. But there's discourse about how well it's actually doing versus how well people think it's doing or something like that. Yeah, it's crazy. We'll get into it. But basically, this is Ryan Coogler's original, totally his own vampire movie. And it's original content. People are super excited about this. It basically follows two twins who return home to the Mississippi Delta after having been away to try to set up their own juke joint, and chaos ensues. Let's leave it at that. We'll get into it. If you are listening to us for the first time, we will have a spoiler-free section designed for those who have not yet seen the film, and then with a very clear alert, we will shift into spoiler mode for the rest of the show. More of an alert than many people in this movie got before things happen to them. But first, PT, if listeners need another taste of us after listening to this episode, what can they do?
If listeners with a brand new pair of brogs rattling over the bogs, frightening all the dogs on the rocky road to Dublin, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, want to join in the affray? They can follow the Long Take Review wherever they get their podcast. We host the feed on Jen's Substack at thelongtake.substack.com, but you can also find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Overcast, YouTube, and many more. All those great places where you get your podcast. You can also follow us on social media, Instagram, Threads, and Blue Sky at The Long Take Review. We are also on Letterboxd. The account is at LTR Pod. You can also follow the hashtag LTR Pod to see what each of us individually have been watching. Jen?
Thanks, PT. So, as always, we'll start with the short take. What was your general reaction to Sinners? Hasib, you want to go first?
Yeah, guess
rights.
Preference, yeah.
I mean, I think this is not only the best movie of the year so far, but it might be one of my favorite movies of the past few years. It's just really exciting filmmaking, very muscular filmmaking from Ryan Coogler. Just out of this world, incredibly dense, filled with themes. I'm in love.
I agree. I thought it was absolutely brilliant. In a time when sort of cinematic popular art too frequently equates to franchises and already established intellectual property, Ryan Coogler has given us, as Jen has already pointed out, the gift of a truly original work of art that can teach us important and piercing lessons, but still be wildly entertaining. I think that you can engage this movie on any level you want, either the visceral thrills, the electric music, the social commentary, whatever it is, you will leave completely satisfied. PT, what do you think?
I mean, a full agreement. This movie was incredible. I saw it a few days after everybody else, and I was a little worried I wouldn't like it. I was like, what if I'm like, it's good? But I needed to have done so because it was absolutely incredible. This is an example of a one for me by a director that pays off. It lets Ryan Coogler explore so many of the themes and ideas and concepts that clearly mean so much to him, while also, yeah, still being just super entertaining and just a really good time. You get to have all these deep elements, and I'm sure we'll be unpacking and unweaving and reweaving to try to figure out what all is happening in here, but never at the expense of just like a great time at the movies and just having a lot of fun with it. So yeah, this is one that people should see. And you know, we're very big on the movie theater experience at the Long Take Review. So yeah, hopefully people will see it on the big screen, as they have been, because it's made a ton of money and keeps drawing in a bunch of audiences, as Jen's already said. Speaking of Jen, what did you think, Jen?
So I often hesitate to use a phrase that we, particularly as listeners of the Big Picture podcast, a great podcast that if you like movies and you like listening to us, you should definitely listen to them. They do it better most of the time. Antonio just made a face. I love it. Sorry. They're part of our inspiration a lot of the time. So we have to pay them due.
Shout out Bobby Wags.
There we go. Oh yeah, he's really underappreciated on that show. I feel like
So
every time his voice interjects, because he's the producer, so he doesn't often talk. I'm just like, oh yes, tell us more, Bobby. Anyway.
I keep thinking I'm going to run into him at the Alamo in Brooklyn sometime.
Oh, that's right, because he's in New York. Yeah, so PT and I have actually met Amanda Dobbins in LA. Yeah, she's so cool. Yeah.
Dobb represent.
Yeah. It was a screening that she and Sean were supposed to host, but then Sean couldn't go, so we got one half of the big pick. But anyway, sorry, this is a really roundabout way for me to slide into my short take. But I don't like to overuse the phrase, we are so back. But we are so back. It is amazing. This movie was great. I had a thrill watching it. I watched it. I had the, off mic, Hasib lamented that he had to miss his 70 millimeter IMAX screening. That's how I saw this movie in my theater. It was gorgeous. Aspect ratio changes were breathtaking. Like I had like a transcendent experience in this theater that was packed full of people on a Friday at noon, and which I was not expecting. I thought usually even in the IMAX theater at Friday at noon, I'm by myself. So to see a full theater of people really electrified by this movie was great to see. And I think it's one of those movies that makes everybody else look bad, because I kind of kept thinking during it, see, writing full characters is not that hard, right? Like he's doing it. Just because you have action and genre elements in a blockbuster movie, in a movie that's made for the mainstream audiences, that doesn't mean that you have to like let go of basic storytelling techniques. It's all here, right? You don't have to, you can have it all. Like this movie really does have it all, where it has the kind of fun action elements, but it also has the deep themes and the storytelling that really resonates and is really emotional. You get attached to these characters. And so, yeah, I have very little, like maybe nothing bad to say about it. No notes, potentially. Another phrase I try not to overuse. But yeah, so I'm really excited that we get to talk about this, because I think there's a lot to dig into. We all like this movie, it sounds like. Do we recommend it to everybody else? Like, we're going to go into recommendation algorithm, which acknowledges that not every film is for everyone. So who's in the audience for this film?
I do think this conversation will be easier for like who isn't in the audience for it. And I mean, there is a like violence and light horror element. I mean, Jen's on the episode, so it can't be that much of a intense horror movie. All due respect, but that's not in your wheelhouse. But there are people that are just like, I don't want to see a bunch of blood and a bunch of people get bitten, and the occasional like things jumping out of the darkness. So if people really can't handle that, or that's just like, they're like, there's no way I've tried, then those people I might be like, you don't want to see it. But besides that, like, I don't know. It's very sexually explicit. So don't bring your like 10-year-old, even if they said it was cool. They were like, I heard this movie's really good. Like, well, that's maybe there's some elements, there's some sex acts that get talked about regularly that in pretty explicit detail that, that could be an issue. But yeah, between age like 15 up, if you can handle violence, go see it.
I agree with all of that. There are no prerequisites for this movie, but everything PT said, yeah.
Yeah, and I think the trailer will make you think that there are. You know what I mean? Because the trailer is cut in a very traditional, do you like vampires? Do you like scary things? Come check out this movie. Whereas there's just so much more to that. But Hasib, go ahead.
Yeah, I don't think this movie is more scary than it is more thrilling and exciting. But yeah, like if you can't take vampire, like the vampire genre, then maybe sit this one out. And I also agree with PT. This is not for kids. It's rated R for a reason. So, yeah.
Rated R for raunchy at times. I will say so we have some connection to other things for those people that maybe are like, but vampires, horror, I don't know. I think that Hasib, you actually made a really good comp in, I think it was in a Letterboxd review. It might have been in our Instagram text thread, where you put it in the like Assault on Precinct 13, Ghost on Mars, John Carpenter zone. That kind of, I think that was you. I believe you said that.
It was not me, but
okay.
I was thinking like there's a lot of John Carpenter influence in this movie for sure.
Yeah.
Like, and I think I remember reading somewhere that Coogler said he was influenced a lot by John Carpenter and he wanted to do an homage of some sort to him. So yeah. Along that makes with sense. Other things as well as Puss in Boots apparently, but yeah.
But then even going further back to the what influenced John Carpenter to make something like Assault on Precinct 13, which is like Rio Bravo, but that idea of we have to do a last stand, we have to make it through the night in this one building, and we have to survive this onslaught of bad guys, and it's outlaws in Rio Bravo, it's street gangs in Precinct 13, it's vampires in this movie, but like it's more about the survival like inside and about the like how do we deal with this threat than it is about this it being that kind of traditional horror element.
I think comparing it to Assault on Precinct 13 is more apt than the comparison I was going to make, which was a combination of 30 Days of Night and Lovers Rock. That's how it felt like to me. So like if that,
I've heard a lot of people compare it to From Dusk Till Dawn.
Oh yeah, it definitely has Dusk Till Dawn vibes.
Right.
Actually, like there's a famous TikTok that's making the rounds where some guys like, there's no Latinos in this movie, and this is very much like Dusk Till Dawn, which Coogler has already like mentioned out there. So yeah.
Yeah, the only thing I probably would add to this, because okay, so I should weigh in. PT alluded to I'm the known scaredy cat on the show, right? I wear it on my sleeve. It's fine. I'm okay with it. But and I was totally fine with this. There were maybe one or two moments when I sort of hunched over in my seat and was like, this is an audio format, so I shouldn't be doing a visual bit. I guess Greg's not here, so someone has to do it. But I was like hiding in my shirt, like, oh no, I don't know oh no, something bad's gonna happen. That only maybe happened a couple times. And it didn't traumatize me at all. And I think it is much more kind of gothic in its mood than it is like a slasher horror movie. You know what I mean? Like, because that's usually what I don't like, is just the constant barrage of jump scares and people getting murdered and stuff like that. This is a lot more restrained than that, I think, in terms of its horror elements. So yeah, I would say if you're normally kind of like, I'm not into horror, I think you'll be okay.
You're not alone in that, okay. Jen. I don't like gore. I watched The Revenant with PT, and I was just like through like half the movie watching anything. So but I also thought that this was like, it was well worth the whatever, and it wasn't that much gore to deal with.
Yeah. The other touchstone I'll throw out here is just, if you like music, there's so much for you in this movie, and in particular if you like the history of American music and sort of like the sort of historical evolution of music. There's so much, and there's so much that the story is rooted in. I can't say anything else necessarily without spoiling anything, but I'd say that's another thing. And if you like a good old fashioned period drama, there's also a lot in here for you, right? Like who doesn't want to see Michael B. Jordan in pinstripe suits? Come on. Like
Fit was incredible.
Yeah.
And
The
looking handsome as
costuming, the
hell.
set design, so good, and the whole thing. Yeah.
For our sort of ongoing Oscar Fairy flashback series, I watched the movie Mudbound for the first time. One of the ones that I had missed, which is I think in the 20s, like I think it's like, or maybe a 1920, but a very similar sort of like sharecropper racial tensions down south type story, and so it is like if that is the kind of a kind of era or movie that you have a connection to, even if you are like, this sounds like a lot of genre stuff I don't care about, it is at its heart like that. It does have those elements, and you're sort of just sinking into experiencing life in a realistic way for a time in that environment.
All right. I think we're probably itching to get into spoiler mode. This is a movie that benefits from going to spoiler mode as soon as humanly possible. So I'm going to say, if you have not seen Sinners, we are giving it a resounding recommendation. I mean, don't miss out. It's in the zeitgeist. It's all over TikTok, like and Instagram. If you get TikTok videos 2 weeks later on Instagram, like I do a lot of the time.
Mm-hmm.
Just go get in on it, right? This is a movement. It's a movement. It's happening, right? Like this is a really fun time to go to the movies and be a part of a pretty rare like monoculture experience, I would say, because it's kind of starting to reach that level. Maybe just in my corners of the internet, who knows? But yeah, that's how it feels to me at least. So I would say go watch the movie. Don't walk,
Run. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. So yeah, go see Sinners in the biggest, loudest screen you possibly can. In fact, go find Ryan Coogler's. We posted it on our social media account. Go find Ryan Coogler's masterful explanation of film formats. I was enraptured the entire time and explaining like the different IMAX screens you can see this on. It's great. Just go see that. Figure out which one's near you. Go see this movie. Then rejoin us for the rest of the conversation. All right, so I wanted to start with, since we all love this movie so much, like, what was your favorite? I put scene or shot in the outline. We can be even more expansive. Just favorite thing in this movie.
I will say, I mean, I won't take one of the obvious ones. Like I have one that is, I think, obvious, and it's on the outline later to be talked about as its own segment. But I will say the way in which broadly sort of presumed the audience's knowledge of vampires to be kind of like, you get it. Like, we're not going to have someone sit down and explain everything in a very sort of like, all due respect to the character of Van Helsing, who always just has to do that in every interpretation of Dracula. So, specifically, I really liked that it followed the rule of a vampire has to be invited inside, which is why I wanted to choose the quote that I opened with, because I thought every time there was a character and it was just like, yeah, they can't cross that threshold unless someone says they can come in. Like, I thought that always was handled great, and how they were always sort of poking at, like, trying to prod at the people to like figure out what's the way to trick them into doing something, but also how the characters, once they knew, were really good. Like, they never got tricked. Like, it only switched when someone was like, I'm choosing to do this. And so I just thought, smart all around. The characters are smart. Vampire characters are smart. The human characters are smart. The filmmakers are smart because they assume the audience is smart. So I like that.
I like, going off of that, I liked how they took that particular rule of vampires, and I think it fits into the themes, which we'll talk about later. So I thought that it was just a really ingenious use. Like, I think that throughout most of the movie, or the beginning of the movie, I thought, like, why does this become a vampire movie? Why is it important that it's a vampire movie? And then it becomes very clear why it's important it's a vampire movie, how the metaphor works. So we're going to get to that thematic stuff. I will say my favorite scene is the one that PT was alluding to, which I know is coming later, but it is that the one in the club with the dancers through time. And it's just the kind of scene that while you're watching it, oh, this is going to be like celebrated for like decades to come as just like a moment in cinema. And so to know that in the moment while you're watching it, it's just really thrilling.
Yeah, I think I know what you're talking about, Antonio, when you're talking about how vampires are used in this movie. And I
Yeah.
thought that was super refreshing, and I can't wait to get into it with you about that. Um, One of my favorite things about this movie is just Coogler flexing, the
Yeah.
camera work and the different one shots and everything. And that's very apparent in the first few minutes of the movie because there's a scene where Michael B. Jordan, who plays twins, is handing a cigarette back and forth to himself. And right there, it just like sets the stage for me. I'm like, oh, Coogler is just absolutely flexing on everybody right now. And I remember seeing a TikTok about how he did that. I mean, I already knew how he did that, but I'm like, just the sheer audacity to do that in the first 5 minutes of a movie was just insane to me. So,
And also, but also with an angle that like doesn't make the division as clear as you're. It's like, oh yeah, like he's cantered it just enough to
yeah.
make you be like, you think you know, maybe you don't. Like
Mhm.
we don't, think about it. Why don't you think about that? So much so that you forget it matters to the story until the end of the movie when it matters to one of the characters that he can't roll a cigarette because
I
like
was gonna say
the
we're in spoiler
brothers,
mode.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I was going to bring up is like it's nothing's wasted. So something like that could just be a technical flex, but it actually like comes back to roost later at the end of the movie when you realize, oh, Smoke doesn't know how to roll a cigarette.
Mhm.
And it just shows without doing much else, it really shows so much about his relationship with his brother and the feeling of the loss of him and all that kind of stuff. So, yeah, so that's a really good choice. So,
What's yours,
maybe I'm
Jen?
gonna yeah, well, so I asked this not realizing I would have to answer it because there's so many different things. So for me, I know I gushed about the aspect ratio shift when I saw it in IMAX earlier. There's this one moment where the screen goes to full screen. It goes from the basically widescreen to full screen when Grace, and you alluded to this earlier, PT, when Grace chooses to let all the vampires in, right? When the kind of they rush in, and it's like that moment right before the huge action set piece. I just was like, this is yeah, like flex is the best word. Where I'm like, this is crazy. Like, this looks amazing, and that's the thing is like that sort of like aspect ratio shift, right? Could be a technical gimmick, and I'm not going to say that it was in Oppenheimer necessarily, but like, you know what I mean? Like it could just be a technical thing to be like, look, we're using two different film formats and we're kind of switching between. But the fact that it was part of the pacing and the rhythm of scenes, I think was so impressive to me. And I hadn't really thought about it that way before. So that's probably, and then my cheat, because this is not necessarily a scene, but my favorite performance of this would be Musaku. Like she just was like incredible, and I love that her character's spirituality and knowledge about sort of occultist practices and stuff like that, and like and voodoo and all that stuff like actually became useful. Like I just love that she kind of stepped in as like the expert in the room because of that.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if I've quite seen a vampire movie that does that quite in that way. And I just thought they did her character justice. Like it was just like it was so fully realized and wasn't just a stereotype of like, oh, she's the one who makes the mojo bags and stuff. You know what I mean? Like and like the pain of the loss of her child and her relationship with Smoke. Like I just loved everything about her and her character.
And she's such a babe in this movie too.
Yes. Yeah. There's
The babe
Also,
level in this movie across both genders is very high.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
want to quickly go back to the moment when vampires have to come in, right? Like that's a necessary part of the film. But part of what I thought was really great about the writing of that moment, like we've talked about the technical aspects of it, but also just like for the character to reach that point, you have to believe why she would do that, right? And often my complaints in certain horror films is that just people are being stupid, and as a result of them being stupid, it like things like happen to them, and so whatever. But this isn't that, right? This is someone like we can see the gears turning in her head, and there was even like a moment where I thought like even afterwards where I was like maybe it makes sense that she would let them in now because like they're only going to get bigger, right? This army's only going to get larger, and so like their best chance is maybe right the second. I mean, I don't know about that, but but like I could at least get through the logic of like what was happening, but also just like what a thrilling like mistake, right? Partially because you can sort of understand why a human being in that position would do it.
Mhm.
Right, and it's emotionally grounded, right? Because
Yeah,
the
exactly.
film took so much care in earlier scenes to show their daughter, show their shop and how they kind of are living, right? And then I think it actually intercuts a callback to that shot of her looking in the window as they're leaving, right? Um, and as a parent who does not like needs to get out but also doesn't enjoy leaving my children, right? Like I was just like, oh, like I totally understand where she's coming from. And also like super chilling when after her husband has already turned and is like, hey babe, let's go, like I got the car, like the car's on, let's get going. And he's saying that so casually while somebody else is getting devoured by
So
another vampire.
nonchalant.
It's crazy. Like it was so creepy. Yeah. Um
And she asks him, like, don't you see what Cornbread's doing? And he's like, oh, he's just hungry.
right. Yeah. So it's so unsettling, right? How relaxed their behavior is and yet makes no sense. Like so yeah, I think this movie works really well on a lot of levels, but it actually works really well as just a vampire movie too. Like despite everything else that's going on. All right. So speaking of vampires, and Greg had advised me to get ahead of the Irish jokes and say, this I've been trying to tell everybody all along that the Irish are demonic vampires. And this movie confirms everything I all of my biases. But so I'm just putting that out there. I don't know if I did
Some would
that
consider
right.
that's inviting them in, Jen. You've just invited it in.
There you go. But the real question I wanted to ask before, having to deal with this nonsense that listeners at this point probably aren't even going to understand. And I feel like I've taken too much time up already. I don't want to explain it. It's a terrible inside joke. Listen to other episodes. I'm sure it will come up and I will sound very irritated. But why are the vampires Irish? Or why? But I don't mean all of them, right? Because all of them that turn are all these different characters. But like the main vampire, Remick, and it's kind of the blues music versus the Irish folk music, but also American folk music. That song that they sing at the beginning is very much an American folk. But what's going on there? Is there significance to that? What do you feel like is the importance of that choice? What do we think?
I mean, I say yes, that it is intentionally chosen. I think Ryan Coogler knew what he was doing with all of these, but I think that it's, it's positioning. The movie is obviously about Black Americans in this community in this time, and that's the central focus. But in looking at sort of all the ways in which they are trapped and all the ways in which they are cursed by the dominant society around them, that they have, they have the Chinese family that's also in there, who are also immigrants, who are just doing what they can to get by, historically grounded in the reality of Chinese immigrants running shop pairs to one for Black people, one for white people, that would exist at that time. But that similarly, there were the Irish vampire, the sort of Remick, as the originator of this, he's just one to start. It's never really clear where exactly he came from in terms of like, were there other vampires out there, et cetera, et cetera. He just comes because he's drawn by the music. But he arrives and, he has his story of, I was an indigenous person who had outside culture come in first. The Christians came. So, it's set up as, he's from 5th, 6th century of Ireland. And then he watched as that sort of came in, took over, insidious. Then the British came. And then when all the other Irish people started dying, he had to come to America. And so now he's in America. And Irish people in America at that point, they wouldn't be welcomed by the KKK either because they were Catholic. So not down, like they weren't there. But they also had the out of like, not looking Black and not looking Native American. So like they sort of have their own, they're sort of like, it is a sort of cusping existence, in the same way that a vampire is not really alive, but also not really dead yet. So it is sort of like this kind of promise of, it almost felt like they, like having it be Irish and also having another immigrant group, the quote unquote model minority immigrant group, be there, that like it was this sort of promise of a post-racial society of like, but we can just not worry about it. We can just all be here together. It's all going to merge and it's all going to be great. But we're going to eat you and we're going to consume you and you're not going to be alive after that.
See, I
I
feel
think
like
that's well said.
Yeah.
I was just going to quickly interject that the use of the word fellowship in that context is particularly disturbing, because that's the word that sticks out in my mind from the screenplay, where like anytime a vampire is trying to convince somebody else of something, namely to become a vampire also, it's like love and fellowship. And like, yeah, it is kind of this very kumbaya language, which is perverted, right, in this context because they're vampires. But go ahead, Antonio.
Vampires have always had an argument for why you should let them in, and that argument has been eternal life, right? So the argument in this film, which I think is just like the brilliant spin on this that brings us to the themes, is that it's eternal life in equality, right? It's full assimilation, but only through erasure. Mutual understanding and civil disagreement, that's hard and that's complicated. So just eradicate everything that makes you different, and we can all belong, right? And the use of vampires for this, it's so unexpected and it's so incredible and it's so smart, and it's still executed so incredibly well and works on an action level. But the fact that like the echoes of this, like I keep thinking about this and keep like unpacking all the threads. But when I came to this, like, realization, I was just like, my gosh, right? Like how lucky are we to be like watching a director doing this kind of work right now?
The other thing that I thought of is from a musical level, because to me, one of the most moving parts of this was sort of the role that the blues play in the story, not just through Preacher Boy, right? And he seems kind of like particularly gifted, and the vampire definitely seems, unusually interested in him because of that. But there's a line towards the end where he says, like, I want your music, but I also want your stories, right? And so to me, what was so compelling about this parallel between, African Americans who play the blues and Irish folk music really was this idea of like music born from oppression and suffering. And because, when you learn about the history of jazz, the first thing, because I took a history of jazz class in college, and the first 2 weeks of the syllabus were about the blues, and I was like, wait a minute, like I was here to learn about jazz, and where's Duke Ellington and Miles Davis, and like, you know what I mean? And I was, poor 19-year-old me or whatever was like very confused. I checked my registration. I was like, wait, I didn't sign up for a blues class. But then when you learn the, like, not only the music theory kind of roots of the blues and how it evolved into jazz, but more the cultural significance of, and they show this in the movie, but they never make like a huge expository deal out of it, right? Like when Delroy Lindo's character is driving with them in the car and they go by the chain gang, and that rhythm of the hammers and stuff like that, like that's where blues came from, right? Like, and they're picking cotton in the fields, that's where blues came from, like, and just this idea that that a musical form like the blues is a way to kind of release all that emotion and tell your story about kind of how you've suffered and where you come from and all that you're feeling, but you have no other place to channel it, right? To me seems like a very powerful parallel, because you could sort of see, less so in the first version of, was like Robin's gonna steal you or something, right? Like the sort of very like I thought of A Complete Unknown, and I was like, oh, where's Edward Norton now? Because it is very much like a very buttoned up kind of like folk, like banjo-y kind of folk tune,
but also like
then
Mumford's Son and Daughter.
that thank you. Yes. But later on, when Remick is doing like the Irish dance, which is amazing, and they're all singing a different, very different kind of mix of or different arrangement of that song, it feels equally soulful, right, to what we heard in the juke joint. So it's like I just all the stuff about music in this I really really loved.
Yeah, I was just to jump on what you said, Jen, and also what Antonio was talking about vampirism and how it's used in this movie. Based on what you said, Jen, they're using vampirism and cultural vampirism in the same way, right? And I was like, has this ever been done before? Because I don't ever remember a vampire movie ever doing this. So I was pretty amazed, especially when Remick just comes out and says it. Like, I don't just want your music; I want all your stories. And I was just blown away by that. So yeah,
It really made me think a lot about Baz Luhrmann's Elvis. I don't know if anyone remembers the beginning of that movie.
he's white.
Where they spend like 3 minutes.
Twist. No spoilers. No spoilers for Baz Luhrmann's Elvis.
Okay, sorry.
Well, but they spend 3 to 5 minutes at the beginning with a montage being like, oh yeah, like he grew up around gospel music and the blues. You know what I mean? Like, and it's such a different approach. But I feel like that's in part what this movie is coming after, right? This idea that, like, you know, I mean, and I say this, I have much love for Elvis and his music, but it's hard to kind of think about him in the continuum of the history of American music without realizing every type of Black music has been at some point appropriated by usually white culture, but like, you know, all lots of other cultures, right? So I think that the idea that vampires are kind of the metaphor for that, right? That they're, but at the same, it's also like really nuanced, right? Because we learn about Remick's Irish roots and the fact that he also has this kind of parallel origin story and experience that complicates it, right? Because he's not just the sort of white figure trying to leech and steal the music away, right? And kind of like, you know, bust up their party, for lack of a better description. But that he also comes from a similar place, like, makes it that much more complicated, I think.
Well, no, please, Hasib.
No, it's very white savior-esque or white centrist in the way that Remick acts, because yeah, he went through like similar situations, but you've also uncovered the fact that he also has the cover of being able to blend in. And it's also very much, I can make a community that's the best for us, but you have to follow me type of deal. So,
Yeah,
you were about to
sure.
say something?
Yeah, well, I was going to say that there's something to the promise of, oh, but there's like, maybe there's a way that we can all, like, in an interesting and you know, fulfilling way, like, have all of us together and share all of these cultural things and have them intertwined. And it's the scene that we were mentioning earlier. That's the history of music. That's the history of the cultures, when the music starts playing and you get the people from the African tribes that are there, but you also get the Bootsy Collins looking guy and the women who are twerking and the DJ who's cutting. But then once the grace comes in, you also get the people from China, you get the Monkey King, and you get the Chinese opera people. And so, like, in that moment when the music is happening, and even go into Delta Blues, like, Delta Blues is based in African traditions. It's based in slave you know, culture. I don't know if that's a good way of saying that, but, you know, the sort of the working in the fields and trying to maintain their connection to their homeland as slaves. But it also has guitars from American folk music, which maybe came from European folk music, like Irish folk music. So there's a little bit of that, like, intermingling in the musical genre, and then the experience of a transcendent artistic moment that connects you through time to all these other people. In a way, is well, that's the promise. Like, that's the light side version of the dark side promise of the vampires. And that's why Remick is there, because he's like, I want to talk to my ancestors. I want to see the people I left behind in Ireland. And this is the way I get to see them. I want to take that power and use it for myself. Even though he's Irish, he's being very white. And so he's just like, I want that for me. Like, give me that power and I will use that so I can do that. But there is a promise in the movie that it is actually something that is ecumenical and welcoming and balanced for everyone. Everyone gets their own way, but they also are all sharing it together.
And then
So we're going back to
I was just gonna say quick counterpoint to that too, which again adds another layer, makes it more complicated. I now realize that we should have mentioned in recommendation algorithm that people need to stay through the credits because I almost missed it. I still missed the second one apparently, but I almost missed the first mid-credit scene because I didn't know to stay, and a bunch of people in my theater were leaving, so I was like, oh, I guess it's over. But anyway, so the scene where very 90s upped Michael B. Jordan and Haley Steinfeld walk in to Sammy's bar in Chicago, right, where he has lived a long life and become a famous blues player. Like, the fact that they come in and kind of show that they have had a version of what they always wanted, which only by being vampires were they able to be together.
Yeah.
And I feel like that scene becomes very powerful because you realize, oh wait, like it wasn't all a lie, right? There was kind of a utopian promise in becoming a vampire. They never could go outside during the daytime. Like, there were drawbacks, obviously, but it sort of showed why they made that choice and why that choice made sense for them. But then Smoke went the other direction, right, and chose not to become a vampire, and we can get into more of that. There's other things going on with that that duality between the two of them, I think. But yeah,
that's an interesting read of the mid-credit scene. I actually had a slightly different read of the mid-credit scene. I thought that they definitely represented like success, right? And success in the industry. But my take on that was that they were capitalizing on that well of historical oppression and pain to make money, right? And that was part of the vampire theme, right? Is just like rich executives who like, why do you want stories? Because we can sell the stories, right? Because like we can make rich people richer with these stories that will be entertaining, and so they are now a part of that industry. And I thought that connection was just like another layer of use of the vampire that I found really effective.
I love it. I hadn't thought about that. Yeah, that post-credit scene, very important, turns out.
Technically, there's a mid-credit scene and then a post-credit scene.
Sorry.
So that's the mid-credit scene.
I missed the post-credit scene. I saw the mid-credit scene. I got to see the vampire. But I feel like the reveal that Smoke made a deal with Stack back on that night to leave Preacher Boy alone, that's a huge revelation for the story. I don't think that should have been relegated to a mid-credits sequence. Anyway,
I think technically it is a mid-credit scene, but it is, in my opinion, the final scene of the movie.
Yeah, I would agree. Right. So
I think they keep showing grown-up, elderly Preacher Boy enough during the course of while credits are coming on screen that like it never really stops being the movie.
Right, and that's yeah.
Even though I would say it's a mid-credit
scene,
right? I also missed the post-credit scene, the very end one, because I thought it was over, and then I looked it up on shady places online, and I watched it, and it's
on
nice.
TikTok, guys.
No, don't use such childish websites. Hasib.
I've been meaning to look. I just haven't looked. But yeah,
it's pretty much what Antonio was singing earlier today. So.
Oh, okay. That makes a lot more sense then.
Yeah. I mean, I think because that's more of a religious song, right? Am I correct?
Yes.
But in that instance, like what Sammy is actually singing about is his passion for music is his religion. And I think at one point during the movie, Delta Slim actually mentions this is our religion, right? It's the music we make for ourselves and in our community. So
the element of religion in the story, I think, is really interesting because there is obviously like there's the preacher of Preacher Boy, his dad, who is like, he's preaching, he's got a church, you can't go there, like you keep inviting the devil in, like eventually he'll show up. So like in that instance, there's a clear dichotomy. But there is also something interesting to any vampire story does have a like, and Christianity's right, like underneath. Because like the crosses work, the holy water works. Like that's stuff that stops a vampire. Why does it stop a vampire? Because Jesus was real and priests can actually bless water. So there's something baked into a vampire story that is inherently Western Christian based. And I think I don't remember this from the movie, but I did see someone mention it, that when the Native American vampire hunters show up at the shack, which is great. That's a whole other thing to talk about. And they're just kind of like, hey, was someone here? And they're like, no. And they see the clan robes and they're like, okay, bye. Like, you have a great night. We're going to go. We'll see you later. Good luck with all of that. But then a couple of them are wearing crosses. And of course, you'd wear a cross if you were hunting vampires, because in the world of vampires, like, you want that to ward off the vampires. But also it's like, well, that's your indigenous culture has been wiped out by Christianity. That happened to the Native Americans. That happened to the West Africans. That happened to the Irish. Like, they came in and were like, okay, now you do this now. And so it is interesting how that mixes in, how like basically like is God and the light and all of that like supposed to be, there's actually this dichotomy there. Or like, is that part of the colonialism, or is that its own separate good versus evil element? I don't fully know that, but I'm just putting all that out there. And
I think what Coogler is trying to say is that you don't need to find God through religion. There's other ways you can find God through. And I think that's what one of Coogler's main points of this movie is.
Yeah, and I think he's being very deliberate in what constitutes anti-vampire lore in this movie, right? Because it is Annie pouring a jar of pickled garlic juice on him that works, and not holy water, when Preacher Boy is basically getting baptized by Remick, right? He keeps dunking his head on it. That's clearly like a baptism reference, right? He starts reciting the prayer with him, right? Like, and apparently, so I've seen some stuff online about, there are a lot of devout Christians who walked out of the theater when the prayer is being echoed by the vampires, because Sammy starts praying because he thinks that might defend the vampire from him, right? But then all the other vampires chime in. They're like, well, we're going to pray with you too. So clearly it doesn't have any effect on them. And so apparently a lot of people got mad about that and were like, this movie's the devil, I'm leaving. Which, I mean, they're lost, honestly, because I think if you finish the movie, it actually has a pretty, like the Christianity, I think, is still strong. We'll talk through Smoke and through Anne. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think it's against that necessarily, but I do think it is being very careful about not using religion as as part of the genre trope, I guess. So I'm less sure about what that amounts to in the end, but maybe my question about why does Sammy ultimately not go back to the church and let go? They ask him to let go of the stump of the guitar, and he doesn't, right? So like, what does that tell us?
I think the moment in the film that for me was the most sort of like magical and otherworldly is the scene that we were talking about, the Wonder scene. And there are so many stories out there that are about how sort of human frailty is like the same. Like when you think of like war movies, like no matter the war, no matter the enemy, like the same human weaknesses are often sort of highlighted as a cause of conflict. What I liked about the scene, what I thought was just so great about the scene, was the exploration of how human joy can look really similar through space and time, through changes in culture and technology. I mean, no matter like the social context or the awfulness of the world around, when presented with like a pleasing and percussive melody, we all want to dance. And is there a more sort of like uniquely human celebratory impulse than gathering together to dance on a crowded floor? And Sinners tells us that we are bound to the past and to the future by our pain, but we're also bound by joy. And I think that is the recognition that is the thing that the preacher boy sort of understands, and that he knows is true. And so that's what he holds on to. So that's my reasoning as to why he doesn't go, like, he can't quite like just recede into, his father's religion.
Yeah, I mean, I would say all very well said, Antonio. Like my short version of that is the music worked. Like, did the church? Like, I don't. He like he's holding that guitar not because he's like this is like my calling, but because he's like this protected me. Like I got out of that because I had this thing. And he also kind of got into it because he had that because the vampire showed up for him and told him that. But, it's complicated. But I think that it's just sort of like, this is important. And I have this gift and I need to be able to use that. And that's why I think, even though I did not see it at the time, it's that post-credit scene is young preacher boy playing his guitar, singing This Little Light of Mine in his dad's church. And so it's like the post credits thing is basically how it's like, is this really like, is it a false dichotomy to be like, you got to choose one or the other? Or is it like, these are actually all intertwined in that way that Antonio is talking about this, we draw all these lines between genres, between religions and between cultures, but it's really just all trying to connect to a wider connective tissue of joy.
There's also the reveal that, because isn't it Stack lies to him and tells him that they got the guitar from a famous musician in Chicago.
Yes. Charlie
and then
Patton.
and then at the end of the movie, you find out that it actually belonged to their father, right?
Mhm.
Or is it? Yeah.
Yeah, their abusive father.
Right. And which and there are other comments in the movie about their father being like a bad seed, kind of, right? Like, or in their family, he had a reputation of being bad. And so that's, I don't know. I just found that really fascinating in the context of what we're talking about in terms of like, it wasn't the fame of this. Maybe this sort of goes back to what Antonio was saying about the commercialism of the being tied to the vampirism. Like, it wasn't the famous musician who made a lot of money that mattered. It was their family, their kind of ancestral connections, right, to the guitar, and that's what gave it its power, kind of. But still, the fact that even we're talking about that is amazing.
I'm also not sure if you're supposed to believe everything Stack is saying to Sammy.
True.
Because he's also lied a couple of times to Sammy during the movie. So
that's true. They're all unreliable narrators. But assuming that is true, there is something in the value we place on legends of like, and this was handed down from this person to this person, which also ties into religion and culture and all of that. There's good things there, but also that like, oh yeah, this was your crappy uncle's guitar. Like, the uncle that we had to kill because he was such a jerk. He had a guitar. You can use it. Doesn't have the same like, and I bestow upon you Excalibur of Charlie Patton had this and he wrote some of his favorite songs on it. Now I pass it to you. So yeah, there is a value there, both in the capitalistic way and also just the sort of personal connection way.
We all create our own mythologies, whether they're real or not. So
there you go. True.
It only just occurred to me to ask this, but are you on Team Stack or Team Smoke? Hasib, for listeners, Hasib is now leaning into his screen like he's on the edge of his seat wanting to hear what the answer to this question is.
I find it difficult to not be on the side of someone who just took a Tommy gun to a bunch of KKK members. So I think I'm going to be on, just for that, I'm going to be on Team Smoke.
I think I'm Team Smoke.
I would say personality-wise, I'm probably a little bit of both. I'm Team Smoke in terms of my anti-fascist behavior, and then in wanting to rock Coogie sweaters, I am Team Stack.
The full Dwayne Wade outfit.
I love it. Yeah. I love it. I mean, Smoke is supposed to be the more sensible one, so I think that appeals to a lot of us in general.
There was a huge rumor that the movie was supposed to originally star. I don't know if it's true. It was originally supposed to be Michael B. Jordan and Jonathan Majors. And then the Jonathan Majors stuff happened, right?
Oh, interesting.
But I think the movie works better with Michael B. Jordan playing the twins because the duality thing is much more apparent that way, in my opinion.
I would agree. Yeah. Like the fact that they're mirror images of each other because it's the same actor, I do think is significant for the themes and the storytelling because they choose two different paths. I think like if they were just, it wouldn't have as much impact if they were just brothers that played by two different actors that made two different choices. I do think the fact that it is Michael B. Jordan in each one changes how you feel about it.
Nah, Jen, they're cousins.
They're cousins. Oh my god! Wait, okay. So that just made me think of another thing to ask. So I think if we're comparing Smoke and Stack, Smoke, I feel like not downside, but like Smoke's potentially fatal flaw is that he still believes in assimilating into the system and learning the system, right? Whereas Stack, in some ways, he becomes a vampire because he agrees with the premise of, oh, it was all rigged from the beginning, so you might as well enjoy your life as a vampire, because that is the thing that Remick pitches to them in the end, right? He says, you're idiots, like that. Why do you think that guy sold you this building? It's because he's the KKK and they're planning to come kill you all. And so I just happened to get here first. Like, he tries to, again, rhetorically very savvy, this vampire. But he sort of tries to make the argument of like, you were all going to die anyway, and your fate was already sealed because racism. And so I'm just here to kind of help you out and offer you this other alternative. And it does seem like Smoke, to the end, he's the one who tries to teach the young girl he meets on the street about negotiation, right? He's the one who is like, we cannot accept these plantation coins, right? And dollars, right? This is not real money. Like, we can't keep buying into this like fake system that has been created because we live in a post-slavery world. Like no, he says like, we can operate like our oppressors can. Like, his solution is to like, we're just gonna beat them at their own game, kind of, in a very kind of like pull yourself up by your own bootstraps sort of mentality. Whereas I would say Stack, and partly because he ends up turning into a vampire, seems to take the more kind of like, well, nihilistic kind of route. You know what I mean?
I'm not sure about that because even when they were running the juke joint, and you were mentioning this, Smoke was working from a pure capitalistic point of view, and Stack was much more liberal about we can do this in numerous ways. You know what I'm saying? Now, whether that would have been successful or not, that's up to the eye of the beholder. But that was, yeah.
What did, if at all, if anyone thought about this at all, did anyone wonder what the twins thought was going to happen the next day if no vampires had shown up? Like, I kind of assumed by the end of the movie they knew, like, oh, we're going to be ambushed. Like, this is all going to go.
That's
and
why
maybe this is it. Maybe like, we really did just do this to have one great night, and we're in a suicide mission.
Yeah, they knew the whole time. That's why they had the guns.
But did they think that they'd win with the guns, or did they think that like, we're going to go out in a blaze of glory?
I honestly they were going to win with the guns.
Yeah, that's what I thought too.
The problem is when you kill a bunch of clan members, is usually more clan members show up. Like, but
they are in Mississippi. Yeah.
Yes. And the word would get out that all these people died, and it was at the juke joint. So that might be bad. But yeah, I guess I sort of thought of it as, they had pulled off this sort of heist that's implied where they kind of ripped off the warring, two different gangs in Chicago divided by culture and heritage, the Italian mafia and the Irish gangs. And they took money from both of them and had them fighting against each other, but that they were going to eventually figure it out and come down here. So it just felt like they were kind of like, the clock's ticking on this. And so that's part of that, like, oh man, like at the end when Stack is like, I kind of got to keep living life. Like, that's crazy. But like, that was a great day. Cause like maybe even at the time they knew that would be it. Like, that was their last hurrah.
And he does say something like, it was for a brief moment we were free. You know what I mean? Like that in the space that they had created, even if it wasn't meant to last very long, that they were able to have that feeling of freedom.
I want to talk about the thesis. Can I get the thing?
Yes. Yes, you can get the thing.
Give us the tag.
Thesis, please.
All right.
So everything that we're talking about here sort of is leading into this, right?
Yeah, I would agree.
So I think it has to start with vampires, right? Which we've already talked about this a bit, right? But like, vampires are a unique kind of monster. I remember I was talking to like the woman who cuts my kids' hair, and I was trying to sell her on Sinners, and she thought that it was just horror. But when I explained vampires, she said, "Oh, well, vampires are different." And I was like, "What do you mean?" And she said, "Well, and then because my kids were there, she sort of like said softly, like, because they're kind of sexy. and and I was like, okay, yeah, right. Vampires are a unique kind of monster because they are seductive and not just destructive, and because it really does play with this rule about that they'll kill you, but they'll kill you with your own consent, and that's part of what makes them sort of like unique and makes their insidiousness like especially interesting, and is used well here, right? We've already talked about that. This is a film that features the KKK prominently in this era, but in the end, that force of malignancy takes one life, right? But the vampires who are the colonizers, right? They take hundreds because they're just looking to increase their numbers. They don't want to destroy you, they want to absorb you. And what makes them especially pernicious is their insistence on your participation in your own erasure and undoing, right? And so for me, like, again, the use of this story that is so familiar, to use it in this very unfamiliar way, that tracks so brilliantly, is just like a writer who's working at like the highest level, director, highest level, everything.
That was really well said.
Yeah.
Yeah. The mic drop moment from Antonio. I like that as the thesis. And yeah, it's interesting because the vampires are clearly a metaphor. Yeah, I hadn't really thought about comparing the vampires to the KKK in this movie.
Mhm.
And now you've got me thinking like, oh yeah, like that is a really interesting contrast.
Without the vampires, it's the KKK that would have been outside being like, we're
Mhm.
coming in.
Right.
They wouldn't have waited for the invitation. They would have just been like, okay,
Right.
now we're coming in.
Right.
It's a different type of maliciousness.
Mm-hmm.
But very distinctly, because they play this audio back twice, where it's the beginning when they originally buy the property, they hand over the bag of money, but they specifically say to the white owner, and now that we have purchased this property legally, if you or anyone else you know show up, we're going to kill you on sight. Right? And so that's a disinvitation, right? So it's interesting to think about that the KKK, they don't play by any kind of rules or etiquette like the vampires actually do. The vampires are more civilized because they have to be invited in, whereas it doesn't matter if they're being invited in or not invited in. The KKK is going to show up either way and try to ambush them. So that's interesting.
You're still unpeeling the layers.
Yeah, like that's the thing is, as we're talking, I keep thinking of new things, which is amazing.
It feels like there's going to be like, we could do a Sinners Revisit episode in like 5 months and be like, oh, we thought of 10 new things that
right.
each wanted to say.
But
yeah, I loved what Antonio, all the stuff that you were saying. I hadn't formulated it in the way that you had, and I didn't get to the level of sort of all the connections. But yeah, the closest thing I had around a thesis was this idea of like the ways in which people are cursed. And there's like, obviously from being a vampire, that's a curse. But then like, when you pass that on, that sure, it can be sexy. That's fair. Antonio's child's hairdresser. However, there is also, it is, in a way sad, because it's just like, now you're stuck like doing this forever. You're either hunting other people or other living things and drinking their blood, or you're withering away, and all of that's very bad. And in a way, that's also just like all these other people who are living in subjugated communities, as people are also like living through their own curses, because they're just stuck like with the confines of these rules that are arbitrary and don't really make sense, in the same way that vampire mythology is this collection of random folklore brought together and then put through the eyes of a few Western European authors, for the most part, and then we're left with these standard rules that get passed down. Is like, why do these rules exist, and why am I stuck with them? But I face these tremendous consequences if I break them at all, and they're not always clear. We don't always know what it is we can or can't do, or like we think we know, but then we can still get turned around on us. So yeah, I think that beyond that kind of cultural appropriation, colonization, all of that stuff being tied into vampirism, it's also just the problem of being cursed and trying to figure out like how to survive with that.
I have kind of a weird thesis proposal, if we're willing to entertain it.
Yes.
So I'm thinking about why the movie is called Sinners.
Mm.
And I feel like the best explanation I can come up with that is that the label of sinner, or the notion of being a sinner and therefore being blameworthy or culpable for what's happening to you, in some ways is a misdirect of when it actually that we use the framework of a sinner as a coping mechanism for things that are largely outside of our control, in terms of you could try your best to make your way in the world, but at the end of the day, if the KKK decides that you can't open your own business, right? You can't open your own business. And all of these kind of outside forces, and I think I would include the vampires in that, and that the turn, so it's almost like, this is definitely putting the movie, which I don't know if it is really, but this thesis definitely puts the movie in the camp of like it's critiquing religion more than it's supporting it. Or it's like trying to carve out a difference between, well, religion is over here, but spirituality is over here. Because at the ending of Smoke reuniting with Annie and their lost child, right? That definitely, you could definitely read that as being a very Christian ending for that character, right? That they're reunited, like, and because they didn't choose vampirism, they chose to meet in heaven or whatever, right? But there's another interpretation of that where it's like, it's actually that whole thing that happens to them, they're able to do that not necessarily because of religion or because of a church, but because of spirituality, right? That they have a spiritual connection that kind of like doesn't have a label on it
And
necessarily.
I think
Yeah.
Annie's too tied to hoodoo for her to be like
right, for her
Christian
to be
heaven.
Christian.
Yeah.
But then that shot of her, which maybe I should have said this was my favorite shot of the movie, when the shot of her presumably from the afterlife talking to Smoke as he's dying, she has a literal like halo light around her, and she's wearing all white and she's nursing their baby, right? Like, it's a very angelic image, right? So I don't know. That wasn't even a fully formulated thesis, but I feel like there's something there about sinners. We call people sinners because we don't want to face what's actually happening, right? Like it's a deflection of like we're misnaming who the sinners are in this situation, kind of.
Yeah, you're on the right track with the reading, because if you look at it in a certain way, a lot of the main characters represent the seven deadly sins.
Mm.
There was a reading that I saw online about that. How
Right, it's
cornbread,
Grace's wrath, and
cornbread is sloth,
right, and I think
and I
Delaware
think Delta Slim is gluttony,
Mm.
and maybe
Pride. One of the twins is Pride.
And the other one's probably greed. The one who
Yeah.
wants money.
Yep.
So-
Yep.
Yeah.
I buy that. I will also say, like, sin is when you break the rules. Like, we have rules for you. It's like, well, where do the rules come from, and who came up with the rules? And like what? How did you end up outside of the rules? Where like what you're saying, Jen, is sort of the victim blaming of what's like, well, you knew the rules and you made the choice to sin, therefore you are a sinner. You're not just someone, that whole like love the sinner, hate the sin, love the sinner is like trying to sort of differentiate, but there also is a degree of like, but that's who you are because you did that, because you broke the rules. But then like when the rules are arbitrary, or when the rules are constantly changing, or when the rules were dictated by someone like from the outside, like just so they can like show power over you, like it's very weird to end up being like, well, how am I the one who's breaking them when I don't know where they came from, I don't know why they came from, and I didn't get any say in what they are.
That was a much more concise way of than me babbling.
I also think what the movie trying to say is, these guys, most of the characters here are sinners, but that doesn't necessarily make them bad people. They're just people in systems of control who are acting a certain way because of the system they're put into. So
also
like
a lot of people who are hot, and sitting is hot.
Yeah.
So that's
this
also
movie
a
is
part
so
of it.
sexy.
Yeah.
All right. So, as I mentioned at the top of the show, this movie has generated a lot of discourse within the trades, the film industry, film journalism, because I think the impetus or the catalyst for the discourse was the New York Times covering its box office take-in, which we haven't mentioned yet because I didn't have time to look it up. They basically said like Sinners like does really well at the box office, but with an asterisk. It was some weird headline that was like, and so they tried to kind of bend over backwards to explain, oh well, because of the budget and the deal that Ryan Coogler made, like it's not actually. Did anyone else read about this?
Yes,
or is it just me?
It was that. It was like, well, it was number one, and it made more money than was supposed to make, like 35 to 40 million, and it made like 47, I think, 46 or 47. They're like, which sounds great, but the budget was 90, so and movies fall off after the first week, so it's probably not going to, it's only barely going to make its money back, and then people could pull out all the other movies that have been made by white people that were like, oh, like it was 90 million and it made half that money back the first week. People were like, what a hit. Like, what a great movie. This is great.
It was really backhanded, right?
Yeah.
And it's still, it was still happening right now, because I'll be on Twitter. It right now is sitting at 162 million worldwide. And I remember somebody on Twitter saying, yeah, but they have to give some of that money to the theaters. And I'm like, when does this stop?
Yeah.
Right. Because like, what are you saying that is not always true?
Yeah.
And like that we never point out with any other movie when we write about it. You know what I mean? Like that's the most strange. That's the strangest thing to me.
It's like, what are you saying? What are you saying with Coogler that you won't say with Quentin Tarantino, who has gotten similar deals as Coogler did right now? So
yeah. So anyway, so there's already kind of like a discourse machine about this movie. And I think it's going to get even more interesting. And by interesting, maybe I mean annoying, as we move into award season, because there's already a lot of folks. Like I just saw Clayton Davis in Variety. The headline he put out today was like, Sinners is going to change everything at the Oscars. Like, it's just going to like break a bunch of precedents. It's going to like, he likes to take big swings, so I don't know. I don't know how. Like if you look at his Oscar predictions, like he thought Isabella Rossellini was going to win Best Supporting Actress.
He was also the person that was like, "Wicked is going to sweep." Like right after it came out.
He knows how to make good content. You know what I mean? Let's give him that. And he is right a lot of the time, and he knows a lot about the industry. His recall of Oscar trivia is incredible. So like, you know what I mean? Like props to him. But that's just an example. I've started to see headlines of people being like, "Could Sinners make a splash at the Oscars?" And part of me is like, are you kidding? It's a vampire movie. However, I feel like every year for the past few years, I've picked it. Like I've said like, oh, Anora has too much sex in it for the Academy. Oh, The Substance is too weird for the Academy, right? Like we had this past year, we had The Substance and Nosferatu, another vampire movie. Granted, it's adapted from a classic story, so that's different. But you know what I mean? Like we have slowly each year in the past 5 years or so, I would say maybe starting with Everything Everywhere All at Once, of like kind of breaking the mold of what could be an Oscar movie. So is this just going to be the next thing that I'm naysaying until I start seeing it get at nominations? And then I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't believe this is happening. Like, what do you think? Like bring me back down to earth here. Like what is realistic here?
I think this could potentially take a Get Out track, right? Because Get Out came out at a similar time as this movie did. Not the same themes, but themes that are on the same wavelength.
Mm-hmm.
And technically great movies, good screenwriting. I can see it getting like a few nominations. I can't see it getting like maybe 11 or 12, but I can definitely see it getting a few nominations for sure.
I agree. And I think, Jen, when you're thinking about like, well, they wouldn't nominate Marvel movies for Best Picture until Black Panther. They wouldn't nominate an actor in a Marvel movie until Wakanda Forever. So like Ryan Coogler has already proven he can get into new quarters of the Academy with stuff that's not normally meant to be there. So, again, it's also dependent on what else is coming out. But I think there was that kind of like, 2025, this is going to be great. We've got we've got PTA, we've got Wes Anderson. We were at one point going to have a Tarantino and a Spielberg. So there's all these like big name directors. We're going to have things. Like Ryan Coogler's a big name director now. Like, why wouldn't he be in part of that conversation once we get to the end of the year? I think that this isn't, does have that potential for Get Out, or even if we want to go further back, like Silence of the Lambs, which came out in February, and would just like, yeah, that's a good movie. Like, who knows about Oscars? And 10 months later, it's like, yeah, we still like that movie. That movie was great. Like we should maybe consider that. Plus it has that, it's a historical drama for like half of it. So production design, costume design, all those below the line things that maybe if it was like set in Oakland now, it would be like, okay, like that's fine. But it has those technical qualities that I think might carry it forward. Plus you've got Ludwig doing the music, like then score and song might come into play. Like it could suddenly add up to, you know, a decent number, high single digits of nominations. How many of those will it win? I don't know. But yeah, I would not be surprised for it to get into picture. I would, you know, obviously I don't know what else is coming. I wouldn't be surprised if Coogler gets nominated in directing, and I think a bunch of below the line nominations. And I would love to talk about potential acting nominations with you once Antonio gets a chance to chime in about
Well,
the chances overall.
just to add more categories, editing. I thought the editing was incredible in the film. Cinematography. I don't pretend that I really understand cinematography, but I think that's right. I think it looked beautiful. You already mentioned the score, so let's talk about the acting categories. Um, I think actor and supporting actor are maybe in play for this, right? Maybe supporting, in a perfect world, supporting actress as well, um, for the character that Jen mentioned earlier, right? I think that I think she's incredible. Um, but I would probably put actor, and supporting actress in that order. I think in terms of likelihood. What do you all think?
Well, let me ask you, who's your supporting actor? I have 3 potential supporting actors from this movie.
Yeah, I was gonna
Delroy
say
Lindo
this.
for supporting actor.
Well, that's my number one as well, and we didn't talk about him enough. We only mentioned him briefly. Every time he's on screen, I am giddy. Like, and even maybe giddy with sadness, like when he's in the car and he's talking about the tells his story in the car, which is just an incredible monologue that leads into him playing a song apparently improvised. Apparently the song part of that scene was just Delroy Lindos just started doing that, and then Michael B. Jordan, when he says to the kid in the back, like, you have a guitar, you should play it, is like an improv in character to be like, do this, like do something with this.
Wow.
So yeah, but I
This-
think Delroy Lindo's incredible, and he's
this-
overdue for a nomination.
Yeah,
for
to
5 points.
spoil a future Oscar Ferry flashback episode. Him not getting nominated for the Five Bloods is like
Insane.
It's just insane. Yeah. So I was gonna say, for that scene, since you were already talking about it, that scene alone deserves a sound nomination. Because the way as he's telling the story and they play the sound effects from the lynching that he's talking about is absolutely chilling. Like, and is like zone of interest level. Like, we're gonna freak you out and traumatize you with the sound work in this, right? And the idea of like the sound can do so much, whereas the visual would be kind of cheap. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because it would be sort of like exploiting the traumatic visual images, but. Anyway, yes, Delroy Lindo. So I think the potential problem with supporting acting nominations for this is there are too many. It's the cancel each other out problem. Like, I don't know.
I think supporting actor, like I am a big Delroy Lindo stan, but I think you're going to see a lot of push for maybe Miles. I think his last name is Catan or
Caton, I think.
Caton, right? Like the weekend the movie came out, a lot of love was thrown his direction. He was given a lot of flowers for sure. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe we'll get more than a few. Just from listening to you guys, it might get maybe 8 or 9 or maybe even 10 because Ruth Carter is going to get a nomination 100%, right? Just the costumes. Like, even when you look at the twins, man, like one of them is dressed up in like Italian mafia garb and the other one's dressed up in Irish mafia garb. And I'm like, I didn't catch that until my second viewing. And I'm like, oh. So, yeah, like cinematography, Autumn Gerald was awesome. Like, Antonio hit the nail on the head. Like, this movie is gorgeous. And Jen hit it on the head as well. The sound design is incredible. Like, it is just, it's working on so many levels.
Yeah. It's the classic A paper. It's firing on all cylinders.
Yes.
That's what
I will also say, I mean, you know, I think it would be like, it becomes awkward because the movie is so rooted in a Black American story. But despite Jen's best efforts, there's a chance that Jack O'Connell could be in the conversation for supporting actor as well, because like that's crucial. He is crucial in this, and he's got like, you know, he's been kind of lingering for a little while. He like was there with Unbroken. People were like, yeah, maybe he'll be nominated. I don't think he was, but you know, he's been kind of hanging around for a little while. So it's I don't think he ends up overlapping either Miles Caton or Delroy Lindo for that, but I could see one of those like for your consideration that lists all three of them. And then my fourth, which is not, I don't honestly mean this, but when I left the theater, I was like, give a supporting actor nomination to Buddy Guy. Like that movie changes completely when he shows up for like 3 minutes. But that's absolutely incredible. Jen, Jen and I have a story. It's not worth getting into too much, but we went to Buddy Guy's Legends when we were in Chicago for a season. He made an unscheduled appearance with the band and sat in for like 20 minutes. Walked through the crowd, hit on every woman who looked over the age of 30, and then sang like a couple more songs, and then just like went back to the back room.
Yeah,
it was incredible.
It was amazing. It was amazing. Yeah. I'm glad. Yeah. Having had that experience and then watching the end of this movie was such a treat. It was great.
Also, Antonio had mentioned Woonmi, I think, and I think Woonmi has a shot.
That's true.
Woonmi is like really understatedly good in my opinion.
Yeah, I would agree. This would never happen, but wouldn't it be great if Michael B. Jordan got actor and supporting actor for Smoke and Snack?
I believe Nicolas Cage's nomination in adaptation shows that they wouldn't do it.
They wouldn't do that. I know. That's why I said it would never happen. But that would delight me personally. I think that would be hilarious. But yeah,
some Golden Globes tomfoolery.
Okay, all right.
Leave it for the Globes.
Well, I was gonna say Michael Caton, perfect BAFTA EE Rising Star nomination.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. It does feel like we're in the weeds now, but it does feel like, in a way, the reason why I was like, oh, Delroy Lindo was likely over him is just because like he historically has been an actor before, and if actors are the biggest body voting on it, they're going to be like, this guy he was a backup singer. Like, what are we doing? Like, there is sometimes a little bit of a bias against someone who breaks out onto the scene getting a nomination, but sometimes it happens. Lady Gaga got the nomination when I think that was her first movie, right? Star is Born.
Yeah.
Anyway, so could happen.
All right. So it sounds like big picture wise, it's possible.
Yeah. It's also possible it ends up with one nomination. Everyone's like, what the hell?
Yeah.
Right. It is early. It is so early. Yeah, that's the thing I couldn't discern is like, I'm like, are we getting so excited about this because we should be? Which I think we should. I said that poorly. We should be really excited about this movie, but are we really excited about its award chances purely because it's this early in the year? Is that part of the, like, are we going to look back at this and be like, but at the same time, Everything Everywhere All at Once came out in March. Mm-hmm. So like, anything really is possible now.
And we definitely had a similar, like, are we just like overhyping like the chances to ourselves when we talked about Oppenheimer when it came out? And
that's true.
It rolled and won a bunch of awards.
It's true.
So who knows?
Out of all the things we talked about, I think Ryan Coogler for Best Director would feel so good. I think that would be the one. If we could only get one, that's probably the one that I would choose. But
yeah, 100%. Like, I can't imagine a Best Director without him, because just the amount, like, I keep saying this word, the amount of flexing in this movie is like unreal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, it's a great.
So I just want to know, Ryan Coogler's been nominated for 2 Academy Awards. Does anyone want to guess what the 2 are? Like him personally.
Well,
anyone want to
Panther.
guess what they are?
No. Is it
Fruitvale Station?
What?
Was it Fruitvale Station for screenplay?
No. It's Creed screenplay.
No.
Oh.
This is why it's crazy. It is the Best Picture for Judas and the Black Messiah, because he was one of the producers on it.
Oh.
And
okay.
Best Original Song for the song from Wakanda Forever, which apparently he helped write the lyrics for.
Wow.
So he needs a director nomination. He needs like,
oh hell yeah,
yeah.
He really was like in charge of for the movie. Like he needs a real one. Let's go.
That's crazy. All right. Any final thoughts? Anything we didn't cover? I feel like we did a pretty good job unpacking this movie, and while still implying that there's so much more we could unpack, probably.
Good movie, and I apologize to Greg for not making fun of you and the Irish enough. I think he'll be back.
I guess his advice paid off. He told me, he's like, you got to get in front of it. Like suddenly if he knew he was not going to be on the episode, he's trying to give me advice about
this
how to
movie needed to be
deflect
like 10 degrees less amazing for that to become more of a film.
Right, that's fair.
Though Antonio knows I texted Buddy Guy for Best Supporting Actor, and I was filled with delight for when the Irish jig happened, knowing that Jen would have to see that. Were the two immediate responses I sent to him and Greg.
It was really good. I liked it a lot. All right. Hasib, I'm so glad that you got to hop on and join us to talk about this movie. Thank you so much for helping us see it in new and interesting ways. Where can folks find you if they want to find you?
I'm on Blue Sky. My handle's Hasib probably. On Letterboxd, I am Beeb Watches Film. And on Instagram, I am Hasib Posts Pictures, which is pretty easy to remember. So yeah.
All very descriptive. Antonio, where can folks find you?
They can find me on Letterboxd at Elefano, Aelefano PT. Where can they find you?
They can find me on Letterboxd at PT McNiff, PTMCNIFF. They can also find the show there at LTR Pod. You can find us on Blue Sky, Instagram, and Threads at The Long Take Review. You can email us, thelongtakereview@gmail.com, or you can just subscribe wherever you are listening to this podcast right now. Subscribe and listen to future episodes and comment away. We'd love to hear from you. Jen, where can folks find you?
You can find me on Instagram, Threads, and Blue Sky at Sopchockchai, SOPCHOCKCHAI. And you can find me on Letterboxd at Qui-Gon Jinn. I just realized we didn't really talk about Haley Steinfeld.
Oh, she was great.
Also great. I mean,
that's probably because I banned explicit quotes.
Yes, you did.
I'm sorry.
In theory, "You Want Some" is on its own explicit and could have been one of the opening quotes.
Hey, one of the best saliva scenes of the year.
Yeah, I mean, so far. Let's wait. Let's wait for the salivies.
Okay.
The 2025 tongues.
Thanks for listening. You can follow The Long Take Review on Substack at thelongtake.substack.com. Subscribe for free, and you'll be the first to know when a new episode drops. You'll also receive written reviews of new films with Oscar buzz, as well as any new installments of prop franchises like Star Wars and Marvel.